ladies. It is so great to have you guys on the virtual couch today. It is June. I cannot believe June is already here. And one of the most important things in June is that, or each month, is that we celebrate different types of conditions or bring awareness to different medical conditions and different situations, whether it's mental health or physical health related. June is Myasthenia Gravis Awareness Month. And so we have a special guest on our couch this today, depending on whatever time you're watching, whether it's the morning or the evening, wherever you are in this world. We thank you for joining us. And we have Alma Sierra Clark on the couch with us today. Some of you may remember her from a prior discussion on Instagram. We had a really deep conversation. We brought her back today because we wanted you guys to be reminded of some of the things that she said. She is the owner of Clean Body Living, and she lives by that. I can personally tell you that. She lives by Clean Body Living. So, Alma Sierra, we thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to say shout out to Veronica. Welcome back to the virtual couch, to our registered dietitian who is joining us today, along with myself, for a special discussion on autoimmune conditions. And so we're going to start with myasthenia gravis. Alma Sierra, thank you for joining us. So myasthenia gravis is one of those conditions that we should know about, but a lot of people don't really know about it. So can you share with us, what is it? How were you diagnosed? What was your journey like?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. T. It's great to be here on the virtual couch. So myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disease. And just to give a little bit of background, autoimmune disease is one in which the immune system attacks a certain part of the body. And with myasthenia gravis, the immune system attacks the muscle nerve connection. So when your nerves send your muscle signals, let's say to open your eyes or to raise your arms or to breathe, that connection is blocked. And people with myasthenia gravis have weakness in those areas. So it can affect those areas I just mentioned, also chewing and swallowing, arms and legs, and then, as I mentioned, the lungs, and that's where myasthenia, unfortunately, can be fatal. For me, it started when I was driving back to Cornell for law school on the highway going through Pennsylvania on a 2-lane road, or Route 81. And all of a sudden, I was going back for a law school final. And I had been up studying, but I knew I wasn't that tired when I began to experience a very, very blurry vision. I was going at about 70 miles an hour, and all of a sudden I started seeing, instead of 2 lanes, I saw 4 lanes that crossed each other, and my heart was pounding. I mean, definitely the scariest moment of my life, because I had no idea what was going on. I thought I was going to black out. I stopped, washed my face, and went away. And this is just, the very short version. Stopped it. It went away for a while, got back on the road, came back. Long story short, I had to call 911. And they did a series of tests, but no one knew what it was. They thought it was an eye condition because I was experiencing a blurred vision. For me, and yet nothing came up with the test. They did a CAT scan of my brain, checked my eyes, everything was fine. And it was intermittently blurred, so I wasn't blurred the whole time. Luckily for me, it was just before Christmas, and I went to a family gathering, and one of my cousins is a pediatrician. And when I mentioned it to her, she said, that sounds like that thing I remember from medical school, myasthenia gravis. And I said, Maya, what? Because I had never heard of it. And that really facilitated the diagnosis, because so many other patients I've heard from have taken a very long time to be diagnosed. And I think that that's true of a lot of different autoimmune diseases. That helps with the diagnosis. I went to ophthalmologist, neuro-ophthalmologist, and then finally got to a neurologist with that background from my cousin, and was diagnosed.
Wow, that's always it always gives me chills every time I hear that story. And it's so incredible. But it's funny that your cousin
Yeah.
said, yeah, it sounds like that condition that I heard about in med school. And oftentimes autoimmune conditions feel like that to a lot of clinicians, kind of like that sounds familiar, something is ringing, like there are these bells going off. And it's oftentimes we don't bring autoimmune conditions unless they have really classic presentation, like your lupus, rash, or things that are very classic, but things that present sort of more atypical. It's a little bit harder to get to those diagnoses. And as a patient, from a patient perspective, oftentimes you would have seen one or two specialists before you receive that diagnosis. So thank you for bringing up the point that autoimmune diseases, that even though they target a particular system, organ, tissue type, that oftentimes you will have systemic manifestations, and bringing that whole picture together to realize that it's an autoimmune condition is sometimes really challenging for on both ends, on the medical end and on the patient end. Veronica, what was your experience like, and how were you diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis 4 years ago, and a similar, situation as Alma Sierra. Is I was working at a very, stressful job. I was working at an eating disorder residential house, working long hours. My commute was, 2 hours a day. And so, I started just to feel abnormal fatigue, even on the days that I was resting. Me and my husband are really into lifting weights and exercising and moving our bodies. And, so suddenly I just started having, pain overnight. I couldn't sleep through the night. Eventually, my pain got so severe that I couldn't even dress myself. So my husband at the time would go into work at 3 in the morning. So I would have to wake up at 2 in the morning so that he could dress me, specifically from the waist down. And then I knew that something wasn't normal. I was just having so much severe body pain from the neck all the way down to my ankles. And so I did, I went to go see my doctor, and she wasn't there. And the doctor that was, covering her just really was very skeptical. He said, I highly doubt it, but, I think it's either going to be fibromyalgia or rheumatoid arthritis. And I told him, I said, well, I do have a strong family history of several autoimmune diseases, type 1 diabetes, Guillain-Barré, another female cousin, similar age, with rheumatoid arthritis. And so sure enough, they ran the test, and it was my rheumatic factor that did come back elevated. And so I did quickly go in to see the rheumatologist, and I am not going to lie to you, she spent an hour with me. And she said, this is absolutely the early stages of rheumatoid arthritis. And so she, at that point, prescribed medication. And again, and I would love to just hear what you all did to treat your conditions. I guess we'll circle back to that. But that's essentially the beginning of my story. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Wow, wow. And it's interesting. Again, it sounds like there's always this kind of complexity to the presentations of autoimmune diseases. And I like the fact that you brought up how overlapping they are, that there are certain conditions that have similar presentations, oftentimes similar labs. And that also makes it a little bit harder to diagnose. And one of the things that's clearly obvious between the panelists is that we're all women, right? So another thing is that autoimmune conditions are actually more common in women, and oftentimes will present in our middle age. So I have always had an enlarged thyroid. I'm an immigrant, and so oftentimes the assumption is that you're iodine deficient, and so you end up with this goiter. And so for many years, I would just be screened for TSH, but no one ever really said Hashimoto's until maybe like 3-4 years ago. Okay. I've had this my entire life. I do not have an Adam's apple. This is my enlarged thyroid. But it's interesting. For many years, I've suspected, but I never had the actual official diagnosis of Hashimoto's until I was about 3 to 4 years ago. So clearly far into adulthood. And so one of the things that was interesting is that I've been symptomatic. Thankfully, my labs have been stable and I haven't had to be on medication. But I've had symptoms on my life. I always thought my symptoms were usual. I'm always the coldest person in the room. As a matter of fact, people are always like, why are you so cold? You're cold all the time. I have a condition. And I've, when I remember as a teenager, I would sleep for like hours. Like I could sleep a whole day when I was a teenager and not have an issue with it. Not and wake up like, what happened? As clearly as a resident, I slept for hours upon hours, but that was exhaustion. So it's just interesting how it's almost like a delayed diagnosis in a certain, and I think a lot of women do say that they have delayed diagnoses. And I think, and it's interesting because people should be suspicious because we're women, we're middle aged, we're kind of the typical presentation in that sense. But it's interesting how sometimes it's a little bit challenging. Now, receiving the diagnosis of an autoimmune disease is kind of an interesting experience because of what I thank you, Alma Sierra, for explaining what an autoimmune condition is. So how was it when you received your diagnosis, and what did it mean to you when you understood the sort of depth of your condition?
Right. So actually, circling back to the whole middle age thing, for me, I was actually 25. So this was like a major shock. I mean, this was, years ago. I won't say exactly how many years ago, but so, and it was my last semester of law school. I was about to graduate. I had a 6-figure job lined up. I had a new car. I just felt like this was the beginning of life and then of adulthood. And then I got this diagnosis. The first doctor told me that many of his patients died. That was what we said. What's the prognosis? And a lot of my patients died. And we went to a different doctor who had a more a positive outlook or more realistic outlook, who would give me some sort of hope. But I mean, it was definitely tough. I couldn't, because I had the blurred vision. I could not drive. I couldn't. It was difficult to just do things that we take for granted. I remember one of my lowest moments was trying to call my mom, and this was, well, did I have a cell phone? I did, but I was using a landline at the time. Dialed the wrong number because my vision, I was like, instead of dialing a 4, I was dialing a 7 because my eyes weren't lining up. Dialed the wrong number again. And the person said, hey, you just called me. And, it was really, and I said, man, this is because I can't see. I had this. I mean, it was tough, lonely. A lot of people can't really relate to it. There wasn't a lot of support at the time. This was, well, revealing my age, this was, 2003. There was no Facebook groups or anything like that. And I was in Ithaca, New York with, not a lot of things around there. So there weren't a lot of support groups. So it was definitely a tough period. I'm glad I had family to at least, talk to and call. And then once I did graduate from law school, I went back home and I was with my immediate family.
Wow.
Who gave me some support.
Yeah, no, that's your early 20s when you just trying to turn up
right
for the first time.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
that's hard. Like, you wait for your 20s so that you can turn up. So right. For someone to be like, change a plan, that is really, really hard. And it's hard to really grasp that kind of concept. So Veronica, you were in a different age group than Alma Sierra with your diagnosis. How did you, and you were well into your career, so you knew what this meant, right? So how did you respond?
Yeah, absolutely. And, for me, it was more, I have my 3 older kids are in college. They need support. We're going through a pandemic, and, my husband, is in his 30s. Should he be dressing his 40-year-old wife? How is it going to be when I'm 50 and 60? You start having, you start spiraling in a very negative direction, and it is a very lonely place. And just, again, just doing a lot of research and trying to keep myself calm, I think is the important message that, we do have valuable research, and I trust my medical team, to give me the best advice possible. But definitely, even though I was, I'm middle-aged, it was still very scary because, I still want to continue to live a very fruitful and active life and be self-sufficient for myself.
I totally get that. So after you got the diagnosis, Alma Sierra, was creating clean body living a part of your journey, or was this always something that you intended to do, or was this as a result of your condition that you ended up creating this amazing platform?
Sure. So after I was diagnosed, we were trying to figure out what medications would work for me. The first medication I was on didn't work. And as I mentioned, I was, at the beginning of my law career. So circling back to what Veronica said about working long hours, I was going into working, doing private equity mergers and acquisitions at a big law firm in New York City. I was working 100-hour weeks, and I also didn't want to be treated differently. Like I didn't tell anyone at the firm about my condition. I just tried to manage. Anyway, I took a number of medications that suppress the immune system. That's how some of the autoimmune conditions are managed, because your immune system is attacking a certain part of the body. The doctors give you medications to suppress your immune system so it doesn't attack the body, but then you do get sick from other things. So I took immunosuppressant drugs for years. These are sort of transplant rejection drugs. And then I also took steroids for 2 years. Then I had surgery, a thymectomy, which is, Dr. T, you could explain more, but it's a gland in your chest that has an immune function, especially in children up to a certain age, but it's supposed to, it plays a role. Oh, okay, look at that. Veronica did say Dr. Clark, but so, maybe that's where it's coming from. So I had a thymectomy, and after my thymectomy, I was supposed to get better, right? But things actually got worse. I started having weakness in my hands and legs at that point that the doctors didn't even make a connection with, but I had weakness in my hands and legs. And then I told the doctor that I thought I was supposed to get better. I said, oh, well, it'll take time. You'll get worse before you get better. Go back on the steroid. And at that point, I had been I just started researching. And I knew that prednisone, the steroid, caused diabetes, osteoporosis, glaucoma. And he said, well, you're young. You're only 31 and you're on a low dose. So go back on the steroid. I went back on the steroid. And 4 months later, I was diagnosed with osteoporosis when I was 32. So for me, that was my turning point. I knew that I had to do something else, like take ownership of my health journey, not just, rely on what the doctors were saying, but like do my own research, start thinking about diet and lifestyle. And that's sort of, how I started. I just started Clean Body Living. I became a holistic health coach, eliminated dairy, which had a major impact, and did a number of other things. I quit my job, working at a law firm, working those crazy hours. So that's how I got to, clean body living. And I'm happy to share more about that, but I want to, give Veronica an opportunity to speak as well.
Yeah, that's such an amazing evolution, and thank you for you did a great job of explaining a lot of those complex.
Okay.
The gland, the thymus gland, you explained the steroids very well. Like, good job. We gonna give you a doctorate.
Yeah, thanks. I've been doing my research.
You definitely sound like you have been doing some research, which is amazing. And that's why I think you're such a great advocate for what you do, because not only do you actually talk about it, but it's your lifestyle. It's truly your lifestyle, and you're so passionate about it. And that's interesting that steroids is such a was a turning point for you, because oftentimes steroids are one of the primary medications used for autoimmune conditions. And it's a rough medication to be on. Steroids have such an impact on the body, and a lot of people who are in steroids just don't even feel good. And sometimes it makes you wonder, am I better off with the symptoms of my autoimmune condition, or am I better off on this medication because I feel even worse on the medication? So it's not unusual to have patients sometimes make that decision to say, okay, what else can I do? But Alma Sierra, you are African by origin, right?
Yeah.
Specifically, remind me what country?
Liberia.
Okay, Liberia. Yes, I should have remembered that. Excuse my memory, y'all. I'm having brain fog. But our ethnic foods, I'm gonna go there. Our ethnic foods oftentimes are very high in starchy foods. Same thing for my Caribbean foods. We eat a lot of like starchy foods and complex carbs, and even though in the actual country of origin, you sometimes have a nice mix of your diet. But a lot of the foods are heavy, starchy, and sometimes not cooked necessarily in the healthiest way. What is your heritage like in that sense, Alma Sierra? Do you guys, what's sort of the more traditional foods that you eat? Is it reflective of a balanced diet? Is it more of, let's say, towards a healthier diet? Is it more towards an unhealthy diet? Like, what is your background experience been with Liberian food?
So we eat a lot of greens. Like I did eat some cassava leaf today. So that's the leaves from the cassava plant, or the yucca plant, that we cook in a stew, with, different things. Like you could have dried fish, you could put chicken in it, you can put beef in it. I mean, but in a lot of different foods that we eat have those are cooked in that way. So there's cassava leaf, potato greens. There's a soup that we eat with fufu, which is fermented cassava. There's palm butter from palm nuts. So a lot of the foods we cook a lot of them with palm oil, which definitely has a lot of saturated fat. But I think that our foods, generally speaking, don't have to be unhealthy, right? I mean, too unhealthy, right? Because you can make them with fish versus putting like lots of meat and lots of different types of beef in there, like different parts of the cow. I mean, there were certain things that my grandmother ate, and I said, I'm not eating that. Like different things in there. We do eat lots of tropical fruits, papaya, called pawpaw, mangoes, pineapple, all of those things. But we don't eat a lot of like fresh greens. Like we won't be eating kale and spinach. Like if we do eat spinach, it'll be cooked in a stew per se. I actually just came back from Liberia a couple months ago, and I was like, I need some green juice. But for me, when I was going through myasthenia and healing from myasthenia, I didn't really care about that. I knew what I had been through, and I knew I was going to try things that I thought would help me to get better. So if I couldn't eat cassava leaf for a year, I was at that point in my journey where I could put that aside. Don't get me wrong, that's my favorite food. But I could and my palate changed a lot because I drank lots. I started juicing. I did, eating organic, doing lots of different things. But for me, I think one of the things I talk about now with clean body living is, your mindset. Like the different aspects of mindset, but like once you sort of make up your mind to you want to heal, you want to go on that healing journey, you'll be determined to do it. So
Yes, yes. And how has the transition been for you, Veronica? How, I mean, you were already a registered dietitian, you were already a healthy eater. So, and I know this because I've watched how you eat. So was there much of a transition for you? Was there like what changed?
For me, and I'll kind of talk about for me what was the most important thing. It was the management of the pain. Okay, so for pain management, your physicians are going to give you non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. If that doesn't work, they try to give you opioids. So even way before developing my rheumatoid arthritis, I just cannot tolerate opioids. I instantly vomit them. And so I had tried, again, I was put on immunosuppressant medications, and the type of medication that I take, can permanently blind me, so I do have to go through an extensive eye test every year for the rest of my life, as long as I am on this medication. So it's very, it's scary. And so what I found was that actually the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, the NSAIDs, were really destroying my gut. I was in the hospital for a whole week because I was in so much severe gastrointestinal pain. So I actually looked for an alternative. I said, what did my ancestors do? What did my grandmother do, my great grandmother? So I am a strong advocate for the use of CBD and THC. Early on in my disease, it was the only thing that was able to help me sleep. And I say the only thing that was able to help me sleep because, if you can't sleep, it's like a chicken and an egg situation. You're not going to have energy to do anything. You're not going to have the energy, for your livelihood, to go to work, to function at home, and so forth. So once I had that under control, I really sat down again with my medical team and said, look, I want to continue to lift weights because I know with rheumatoid arthritis, conserving my bone health is essential. And so, my doctor, fortunately, had been a sports medicine doctor and said, just do 75% of what you usually do in the weight room. That was very effective. And obviously, I was already doing some variation of a vegetarian diet, but I did transition to a pretty strict vegan diet. And so that made all the difference, right? Within 2 years, I was able to go from seropositive. All my values are now seronegative, and I feel amazing. I don't have flare-ups. I have completely resolved my gut issues. And so again, just like Alma Sierra, I'm not going to say that it's perfect, right? 90-10. My mother is, 73 years old. She makes tamales once a year. And as long as my mother is alive, if they're pork tamales, I'm going to have one. I don't have to have a whole dozen of tamales. But again, 90% of the time is the same thing. I follow a very, high fiber, low fat diet, which is essential to good gut health. And that's what helps us to build a healthy immune system.
Yeah, I love that I do want to point out a couple of things that you guys have said that I think are really important. Also, we've talked about the healthy living. And for me, I knew I did not want to be on medications. I'll tell y'all. Listen, I don't have time for daily medication. So for me, when I got the confirmation of the diagnosis, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm dealing with an autoimmune condition. We're going to keep this autoimmune situation as healthy as I can. And so it just motivated me that much more. I was already kind of transitioning into a healthier lifestyle, mainly because I chronically, since I was a little child, I've suffered with constipation really badly. And throughout my adulthood, I realized, oh, my bowels don't like unhealthy eating. Like they straight up will hate on me if I eat unhealthy. And so I was just naturally evolving to a healthier eater, just simply. And it's not that I was, a really unhealthy eater, just an unbalanced eater. Because like we would have a plate of like oxtails, rice and beans, and plantains. So we're missing a whole lot of greens. We may have a couple of greens here and there, but we may also have mac and cheese. So it's not really, you know what I mean? Like really unbalanced, but had the elements that could have been a little bit healthier had it been a more balanced meal. So I was trying to transition into more balanced eating, foods that were more gut friendly, to put it that way. Not the rice and the red meat, like maybe rice or red meat. So that was already part of my journey. And so as I got the confirmation, it just became much more, I became much more determined. Like Amisieta said, you like your mindset just really changes. And you're like, for me, I just knew I did not want to be on medication as long as I can put it off. For anyone who's not familiar with Hashimoto's, eventually most people with Hashimoto's will become hypothyroid. And so that means your thyroid gland is underproducing the thyroid hormone, which pretty much regulates a lot of things in your body, how fast you burn calories, how fast you move, how fast cells work or how slow they work. So it's again, autoimmune conditions have generalized symptoms. And so that was my journey. And I've gradually started to change a lot of things. I came off of the whole milk, and I was already on that path. I was down to 2% and down to 1% before the diagnosis. And now I'm almond milk, mainly because I love almonds. I actually love healthier foods. I love fresh foods. I actually enjoy that type of diet. So for people who are kind of like, oh, it sounds like torture, I think if you, because I definitely have patients who have, I've heard this multiple times. I hate vegetables. There's no vegetable I like. Can I tell you, have you heard that?
Wow.
Veronica, I'm sure you've heard that. Because if I heard it, I'm sure you've heard it. So, you know, it's.
Yeah, and I think that, again, let's kind of real talk. I think that when people think in terms of healthy eating, a lot of times they think it has to be a very Western central way of eating, right? They have to eat quinoa, they have to eat kale and so forth. It's like, you don't have to do that, right? Our culture eats a lot of cactus. We eat a lot of, different squashes and so forth. And so I always tell patients, you don't have to give up those foods just because your food is not in a plate. We mix up a lot of our foods, just like, like Alma Sierra was saying, there's a lot of stews, right? We put a lot of stews. So also just really embracing that if we are diagnosed, it is a good opportunity to just enjoy more of our plant-based cultural foods.
Exactly. That's such an excellent
like
point.
That.
Because a lot of people really do feel like they have to convert and leave their ethnic food, like all of their ethnic food is bad. And that was pretty much my journey, Veronica. Like I realized, okay, I like my ethnic food. I'm not giving up. Like I won't have oxtails very often because my system is like, girl, please. So I will space that out and it'll be like a treat for me. And I have a little bit, and then I know I need to have a whole lot of roughage if I'm going to have some oxtails. But it's just, really is such a great journey to kind of figure out and learn about your body and learn what works for your body, what doesn't work for your body. There's certain foods that work for some people and doesn't work for other people. So it's really, I think it's, embrace the journey kind of a thing. And there's so many, like I tell my patients all the time, there's so many vegetables in the world. I think I actually looked up once, it's in the thousands. So it's impossible to hate every single vegetable. Like it's impossible. And I think part of that is a mindset as well. Now, a couple of things I want to highlight that you guys mentioned also. So we talked about food, we talked about exercise. Thank you guys for bringing that up. But two other things that people don't realize, Amisieta, you mentioned that you left your stressful job. Like a lot of people don't understand the impact of stress on autoimmune conditions. Can you speak to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I was working these crazy hours, and I also think that I could have incorporated some stress reducing techniques while I was in those jobs. And I remember my mom would tell me, she's like, just breathe, like do some deep breathing for 5 minutes. I'm like, Mom, do you understand? I have to turn this merger agreement. I don't have 5 minutes to breathe. I mean, like seriously, I told her this. So. But I mean, I meditate all the time now, right? Just meditating for 5 minutes. I did have 5 minutes, but even for 2 minutes, just slowing down your breathing, concentrating on your breath for 2 minutes can calm your body down. But stress, like you said, I mean, stress leads to chronic inflammation, which is the root of like all disease. So I definitely think that we can implement those sort of daily things. We can implement weekly stress management techniques, doing yoga. It doesn't have to be yoga like what Veronica was saying. It doesn't have to be that sort of cookie cutter, like, oh, everyone's doing yoga. There might be some other technique or something that's been, in your family or in your culture that you can do to relieve stress. I mean, just even going for I'll say a meditative walk, but a walk where you're not really trying to exercise and burn calories, but you're observing nature. But there are lots of different things that people can do, and it's really imperative that we incorporate those because they do contribute to autoimmune disease. Just one last thing, like there's this technique called tapping. I don't know if either of you are familiar with it, emotional freedom technique. It's a combination of acupressure and modern psychology, where you tap on acupressure points and you say a phrase, like, even though I'm really stressed in my job, I completely love and accept myself. Yeah, but we could do a whole different session on that. But anyway, my aunt had told me about tapping when I was in my stressful job, and I told her the same thing. I don't have time for that. You see, it's the mind. It goes back to the mindset, right? Like I just wasn't in the right mindset at that point. But totally agreed. Stress management is critical for managing an autoimmune disease.
So true. And it's so funny that you said that because my PCP did prescribe me mindful breathing during my job.
Okay. But that's a good PCP though.
She literally was like, she's a sister. So she literally was like, girl,
Okay.
I need you to do some mindful breathing in the midst of your day because I need you to de-stress. So I love her for that. I love her for that. So thank you for explaining that. I feel like I've heard tapping before, but I definitely am not familiar with it. But I feel like I've heard it before. I just don't know how it works, and so that's really interesting. And there's so many, like, it almost reminds me, a little bit of a side note, it almost reminds me of kind of the logic behind the cognitive exercise in working towards against Alzheimer's and cognitive conditions and decline. So you do sort of this, you basically activate the mind while you're working out. You're just not doing things by muscle memory. You're actually doing exercises for the mind. So the mind is just so powerful. I just want to say that. But the other thing that Veronica mentioned was her sleep. And a lot of people don't really pay attention or really prioritize sleep, but sleep is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory tool that we have. And so we know that a lack of sleep has been correlated with chronic inflammation, just as Alma Sierra mentioned that stress does trigger inflammation in the body, so does a lack of sleep. And so it's been correlated with obesity, it's been correlated with hypertension, with cancer. It's when our bodies really repair itself. And so sleep is really important. So I don't want to overlook those key points that you guys brought up. But I did want to ask you, as we start to wrap up, being diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, because a lot of people go immediately to lupus, and to I think that's probably one of the most common autoimmune conditions that people know, and they automatically go to sort of the poor outcomes. So what would you say to someone who may be diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis or with myasthenia gravis and really starting to grasp the gravity of it? Like, what would you say to that person, Alma Sierra? And then we'll go to Veronica.
I would tell them that there's hope, and that they need to learn to own the power in their health story, to own the power in their healing journey. Because there are things you can do. Like a lot of times, like when we are diagnosed, when I was diagnosed, I just thought there was nothing I could do. All I could do is take my medications, and then whatever my doctor told me, that was what was going to be the outcome. But we have power because we're the ones who are living with our bodies every single day and making all the decisions for all the things that we do. So for someone diagnosed with myasthenia or any other autoimmune disease, I always tell them that they should own the power in their healing journey and learn about all the things that they can do to improve your health, because you can't really control the illness sometimes, but you can control your wellness. You like that?
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Ooh, okay. I love that. I love that. Veronica, what would you say to someone with your condition as well? Like, what would be the one thing that you would want to relate to them? That was
I want to relate to them also is that, because I know that patients that when they first get diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, they start to put them on some injectables and, different immunosuppressant drugs. And I want to let them know that they're not a failure if that is the case with them. If at any point in their condition, they do have to take steroids or they do have to take injectables and so forth, it does not dictate who they are in terms of the value as a person. And so for that, I say also, it is important to be your own advocate, right? Just because, one medical provider may say, oh, well, I don't think, that this is likely for you to have it like it had happened with me. I think it is important just to really say, no, I know my body. I live with my own body every day, and something is not right. And not just that, I would say that there is so much resources out there. There is the Arthritis Foundation that does have a lot of, research for people to read. So continue to just, stay educated and have, go into your doctor. Do not skip your doctor appointments also is the other thing that I want to put out there. And yes, nutrition is an integral part of the management of any condition. So they should seek a referral, to a nutrition expert as a part of the healthcare team. I would say sooner than later. Do not wait.
I love that. Food is medicine. It really is.
It is.
And so I oh my gosh, I love what both of you said. Such very key points, and I love the empowerment also. I would say one of the things that I hear all the time, especially when I have to give someone the diagnosis, is that the body betrayed me. And I want to say to that person that your body did not betray you at all. You are living in an imperfect world, exposed to so many things that are out of your control. Your body is just an expression of your experience in this world. And so there is no betrayal. And actually, the fact that your body is giving you alert and signals is a good thing. It's letting you know, I'm having a problem here. I need your attention. And so definitely do not go forward with that mindset, because, it's autoimmune conditions are rough. They are sometimes very challenging. But I love the fact that our panelists have said, but you have the power, right? And to what Veronica also brought up, working with your health team. Like, don't feel that, and Alma Sierra actually touched on this point with her experience as well. Don't feel that you are being dictated to, but become an active participant in your team. You don't have to make a decision on that day. Like, if you're given recommendations, you can ask for time to think about it. Unless you're in the hospital and it's life or death, you have time to consider your options, to do your own research, and to become an active participant in your condition. I mean, oftentimes as clinicians, we so focus on the outcome, like, we want to improve this. We want her to walk. We want her to have 5 out of 5 strength. We want her to be able to resume this type of activity. But we have to remember that patients are human beings, individuals with diverse experiences. So you may have 10 people with the same condition who make 10 completely different choices and manage their condition very differently, because our experiences are different, our lifestyle are different, our belief systems are different. And so we have to respect even it may not be what we want, what we think is right, we're not living that person's life. And so it's really up to the patient. Our goal is really to give the information, which is what we're doing here now. Give the information so that people feel empowered to understand their condition and then to make decisions that are right for them. Right? So that being said, you ladies have been amazing, such amazing advocates for autoimmune conditions. I love it. I feel empowered, I feel enlightened, and I feel community, which is really important. So someone brought this up before. I think Alma Sierra brought this up on Facebook, on social media. You'll find social support groups that you can join, Facebook groups that you can join. A lot of folks are having IG lives and discussing all these conditions and things like that. Make sure your resources are valid, though. Make sure you are hearing from people who know. That's the only thing I'm going to say. Right. Don't just take random information, but make sure you check the information that you're getting. Make sure you check the source also. So that being said, we'll start off with Veronica. Where can they find you if they want to find out more and follow you and your amazing nutritional tips?
They can follow me on Instagram at dietitian_from_BP.
Love it, love it. And Alma Sierra, where can they find you and learn about and read your quotes? Because her quotes are amazing. Okay, yeah. As she bomb dropped tonight.
Thanks.
Follow her.
Thanks, Dr. T. I'm on Instagram at Clean Body Living, Facebook at Clean Body Living. You can also find me on cleanbodyliving.com.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And we do follow her. And I am Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club. Thank you for joining us. And if you haven't followed us, make sure you follow us and subscribe to our channel. What you waiting for? Hang out with us. Aren't we giving you some good information? Yes, we are. So make sure you join us, you subscribe, hit the like button if you like the information you've received today. If you have a comment, if you are someone who's living with an autoimmune disease, make sure you comment and let us know, how are you doing? How did you do it? How are you surviving, right? Or how are you thriving? So we want to hear from you, and share. If you know someone who has an autoimmune disease, hit them up, send this video their way. Make sure you see that arrow that goes that way. That's the one you want to hit, okay? And for those who are on Instagram, make sure you check us out at healthybump.club. Make sure you follow us there. Hit us up in our stories. We be going down the stories. We have a whole lot of laughs, a whole lot of jokes in the stories. That's what we get down, and we loosen up a little bit. But on our posts is where you find all our official information. So we thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.